We had this comment come in yesterday under one of our videos, and it is, how do you guys write if you have people around you? I find it very hard. I feel antisocial, and they keep talking to me. Wife and kids can be hard on your writing.
I think you gotta negotiate with your loved ones. That's one of the things that I tend to do. And also to find ways to carve out time to be able to say to family members, I need X amount of time, or I'm gonna be working for this hour or the next hour and a half. I also find that there are times that I can put on headphones and white noise and kind of go into a space where I can concentrate pretty fully. I think partly for me that comes from growing up in New York. I've written on subways and in parks and coffee shops, and there's kind of a way to kind of find a Zen moment in the middle of busyness that can sometimes work for me.
Is there an amount of time that you schedule to write daily, no matter what?
That's such a good question. I feel like we writers get really hung up on amount of time to write. And so I don't have a number of hours, minutes, but I think of writing the way I think of eating. I talk about this a lot as an analogy. So I eat every day, right? Sometimes 3 meals, most often 3 meals. Sometimes it's on the run. Sometimes it's a meal that sort of takes hours, like Thanksgiving, where I'm there for hanging out, grazing, And I feel like as long as I have a relationship with my eating, then my body stays healthy and I bring in the nutrients and all that stuff. I feel the same way about writing. Sometimes I'm dropping in for 15 minutes or half an hour or an hour. It depends on what the day looks like, how many other appointments I have. Many of those appointments are connected to my writing life, producing things, or if I'm pitching a project. But I try to drop in on a regular basis, 5 days a week, to some extent. And sometimes that'll extend to several hours, and sometimes I'll just grab a little bit of time, but as long as I keep touching the work, I feel like for me that's the goal.
Okay, interesting. So sometimes it'll be sitting down to enjoy this, 6-course meal, and other times it'll be eating a breakfast burrito on the go or something.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, just real quick and...
Yeah. So I might have a notion of a scene that I want to fix or touch, or a quick outline, or a quick hit on. This morning I was working on a play that I've been writing, and I had some ideas about stuff, and I just dropped in. I started reading from the beginning. I made a few tweaks, and I ended up actually working for 2.5 hours. But sometimes it'll just be 30 minutes, or 15, or 45. And as long as I continue to show up in that way on a regular basis, I feel good about it.
Can you talk about the importance of setting goals and how this has become what seems like a guiding force in your life?
Goals. I think for me, goals can be pretty elusive partly because I think, we live in a culture where there are so many things going on. People often talk about busyness as a badge of success, and so I can and do end up having more projects in my head and on my list than I can actually get to. And I have to negotiate with myself in a given part of the year around what am I actually working on? Where and how am I actually showing up? And then I think within that space, if I say, okay, it's these 3 projects for now, I try to give myself deadlines, or I try to give myself benchmarks. I'm in a writing group, and so I know, I'm coming up to this date where I'm going to need to present material. So I need to prioritize getting to that material before those dates. Or I'm about to have this meeting with this producer, and I need to have moved a little further in terms of the pitch document or the character arcs or whatever it is. So I tend to attempt to set goals for myself and get the outside world to help me keep track of what is the priority today or this week or this month by inviting other people into my process and leaning into deadlines whenever I can.
And I'm not sure if I heard this on your Secret Writer podcast with your co-host Nick Job, is it? That you felt frustrated at one point because, you've gone to Yale, you have an education that, some people, wouldn't even be able to match. But you felt like you still had to prove yourself over and over again. You got frustrated, and then you said, I just want to be happy doing work. And sort of that, forgive me if I'm butchering the story a little bit, but that you decided at one point that you weren't going to be disgruntled about it. You just wanted to just start doing projects.
Yes, there's a part of me, and I think this is true of many writers, probably most of us, where there's the part where there's the desire to create, and there's, of course, the desire to make a living. Sometimes those things overlap, and sometimes they don't. And so I find that for me, I'm super grateful to have written on, 6 shows over 8 seasons of TV. And at the same time, when I'm not in that space, when I'm not in a writer's room, I want to be working on the next whatever it is, whether it's a play, whether it's a long play or a short play, whether it's a web series or a short film or a TV pilot. I'd rather find myself busy, creatively busy, employing myself with things that really interest me and things that really excite me. I'd rather be doing that. And find a way to combine them eventually, but in the time when I'm not working, working for somebody else, bringing in an active paycheck, that notion of just trying to nurture the next artistic thing becomes really important to me. It's like exercise. I just want to keep at it so that I keep those muscles going, so that I keep entertaining myself, so that I keep creating new stuff.
Does that help, on days or, coming out of the writer's strike, whatever, where it's easy to fall into an inertia and just be depressed and, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Is it easy for you to set these goals?
I think, I don't know if it's easy to set the goals, but I do think that I'm really aware of this dichotomy between, like capitalism and creativity. So when those two things can be combined, great. But I think far too often, some of the writers that I meet and that I work with want to think of creativity only in terms of capitalism. And that if their creativity is not bringing in money right now, then there's a disconnect from the idea of creating anything. And I want to keep those things going together as much as I can. My father is a visual artist, and he made his living as an art teacher primarily, and yet he was always doing stuff. And I feel like I've taken an aesthetic from him. He was always painting or drawing or doing silkscreen or puppetry or collage. There was always something that he was up to, and that's kind of the philosophy that I try to bring with me.
Why is it important for you to finish a screenplay, a novel, a play, anything that you're working on? Why is finishing important to you?
I got advice from a teacher in playwriting school, get to the end. Marcia Norman, won the Pulitzer Prize for Night and Mother, and that was her big advice to us as students and to me in particular. I have to say I haven't, it's not like I've finished everything I've started, but there is something incredibly valuable about getting to the end, and then once I've gotten to the end, then I have something. I have something that I can tweak or mold or shape or change, or, people say all the time, writing is rewriting. So it's harder to rewrite, I think, if I haven't created an entire piece. If I'm just tinkering with the first scene forever, then I think there's a greater chance that I'm going to put the piece away. But if I get all the way to the last scene and keep going back and keep, moving through the process, I think I can better give life to the material. And so, getting to the end and finishing becomes really important, because on some level, unless there's a deadline, you're never really finished. You can come to end of scene, end of play, or end of pilot, and then you can, of course, go back when you get notes, if you get notes, when you take it to your writer's group, when you have a new inspiration, when the world changes in some way. But having a piece that is whole is an amazing platform for kind of the next level. So I feel like it's really important to do that.
Did you watch your father finish things? I know with visual artists, there's a different, it's never finished, and
Yes.
we've heard of these famous painters throughout time wanting paintings back as they weren't done with him.
To a certain extent, Dad has finished a bunch of things and also not finished other things, and I think I've observed that from him. I've seen the joys and the challenges of what it means to complete something and to sign it at the end and frame it somehow and celebrate its existence because there's some completion to it. And I also know the challenge of, still working on this piece, so I feel like I've been able to weigh for myself the differences there, and it's much more satisfying to get to the end, even if it's not perfect. Which is the other thing, like we're always talking, if we listen to reviewers, if we listen to people who say perfect performance or perfect film or perfect, there is no such thing as the perfect any piece of art. Like it's always flawed in some way. So moving to a sense of creating something that is finished, imperfectly finished, is I think a much better and healthier space to be in than holding on to it because it's not perfect, because nothing will ever be, that ideal thing. And I think that the corollary to that is we all do this. We go to see plays and movies and TV shows, and we sit there and sometimes in a healthy way, sometimes in an unhealthy way, we critique the piece. So if I'm seeing lots of material over and over again, none of which is perfect, then why am I holding myself to this standard of perfection? Why not allow my pieces to live as much as that flawed piece on TV or that wonderful but flawed piece of theater? It's only fair to me that I can bring my same perfect, imperfect piece to life just like anybody else.